Hello, this is Brett Lonsdale. Welcome to our session today on BCS Meta Man and also the term sync. This will hopefully be a great webinar that's going to expose you to business connectivity services in SharePoint 2013 here. Don't worry if you're not using SharePoint 2013. It's very relevant to all versions of SharePoint and also Office 365 as well, as far as the business connectivity services standpoint is concerned. Yeah, I'm here presenting. My name's Brett Lonsdale. I'm out of the UK, as you can probably gather from my accent. We're in a place called East Haddon, which is right in the middle of nowhere. We're on a farm, and it's pretty cold for this time of year. We actually had snow yesterday, so that's pretty much unheard of for almost May. But anyway, welcome to the session. We've got Jeff as well, Jeff Kate. He's from PremierPoint Solutions, and he's going to be demonstrating to us as well. So let's do some introductions, and we'll get started. Okay. All right. So Brett Lonsdale is my name. Like I say, I'm a co-founder of Lightning Tools. Also one of the hosts of the SharePoint Pod Show. That's something, if you've not come across it before, SharePointPodShow.com is the URL. It's a pod show where we interview people within inside the SharePoint space and interview them on their area of expertise, if you like. So there's quite a lot of recordings there that you can go back and listen to. Also over here in the UK, I've been the organizer of a SharePoint Saturday event, and also a new event that currently we're looking at holding our third one. It runs every 2 months, and that is a UK Community Day. We've done an Administrator Day, a Developer Day, and we're now looking at doing an Office 365 End User Day as well. Okay, so that's me. My Twitter handle's there. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to tweet, and I'll be looking out for that, and I'll be able to answer those questions, or drop me an email. My email address is brett@lightningtools.com. I'll try and address those in the webinar. If I don't get to them, then I'll certainly address them after the webinar as well. Okay, so just a little bit of my background with business connectivity services. It's really been a space that I've been in ever since it was introduced. In fact, before that, I was a huge fan in SharePoint 2003 of the data view web part, which came in front page at the time. Yeah, I was fairly blown away by the fact that you could use this web part to connect to external data sources like Oracle and like SQL and so on, and bring that data into SharePoint and make it available to your users. So when you had line of business systems, we could still expose that data and if you like, build a sort of SharePoint based hub of business data. And in 2007, I was obviously more blown away when Microsoft came out with the Business Data Catalog, or BDC as it was known then. Something I really got my teeth stuck into. We built BCS Meta Man, or BDC Meta Man as it was formerly known back then, and that became our first commercial tool. And also wrote the book, The Developer's Guide to the Business Data Catalog, with my co-founder of Lightning Tools back then as well. And then fast forward to SharePoint 2010, when it was released, Business Connectivity Services was born, basically a renamed version of the Business Data Catalog, but added a lot more to the suite of services. We had things like the external list introduced, which allowed us to write back to external data sources, and improved tooling as well. So if you wanted to create a connection to an external data source like SQL, hey, you no longer needed our tool. So yeah, you could use SharePoint Designer to connect to Microsoft SQL. However, using the BCS Meta Man tool, there's about 30 plus external data sources that you can connect to without code, and that's what we'll be looking at today. Yeah, over to you, Jeff, to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Brett. Excited to be a part of the webinar today, and hello everyone. I'm Jeff Kate, founder of PremierPoint Solutions. We started as SharePoint Solutions back in 2003, so we've been devoted to SharePoint, and may have heard us under our old name. We changed a few years back to PremierPoint Solutions to kind of reflect the fact that we had broadened some of the products and services that we offer. We're best known for our extranet collaboration manager add-on to SharePoint. It's been on the market for about 10 years now and is probably the most popular way to enable SharePoint as really an industrial strength extranet platform. But TermSync that we'll be talking about today in this webinar is a newer add-on. We developed it starting about 3 years ago, and it's really targeted at the kind of things that you want to do with enterprise content management in SharePoint. You can see here that I also happen to be the author of a course, an instructor-led course that we teach frequently called Designing Enterprise Content Management Systems with SharePoint. Of course, managed metadata is a big part of enterprise content management. And my Twitter handle there is at Jeff Cate if you want to communicate with me. And again, Brett, thanks for including me in the webinar. Looking forward to it.
Okay, no problem. All right, so let's get started on the agenda. So first of all, what are we going to be looking at? Well, we're going to have a high-level view of business connectivity services, and the main point of that is to make sure that everybody's on the same page as to what business connectivity services is, what it brings to your organization. And we'll also have a look at business problems that are resolved using business connectivity services as well. Besides that, who's involved in actually configuring BCS? Because as you'll see in a moment, it takes really a team of people, or a team of roles, I should say. You may wear all of those hats, but it's a team of roles to actually get business connectivity services deployed and up and running. We'll take a look at BCS out of the box. What does BCS give us? So we'll be exploring the external list, which is like I said, that was introduced in SharePoint 2010. Internal lists will be things like task lists and document libraries and links lists, contact lists, things like that. So an external list is virtually the same, has pretty much similar behavior, but it's working with data that lives outside of SharePoint, and it doesn't really matter what that data source is. You should be able to connect to it somehow, and that's obviously part of the tool set that we'll be looking at today. We've also got some web parts. So the web parts have been around since the Business Data Catalog was launched, and in fact I mentioned the Data View web part, and behind the scenes the BDC or BCS web parts are actually Data View web parts, but they're somewhat modified to allow you to display data coming from business connectivity services. They're read-only, but the nice thing about them is you can actually join them together to represent your one-to-many relationships or joins inside your external data sources. So if you have something like customers to orders and orders to order details, you can reflect that on your SharePoint pages. And if you want to get your hands dirty with some XSLT and so on, you can also provide lots of styling and so on, conditional formatting and that sort of thing to that data. So it's a great way to get people using SharePoint and to be able to view data that might be coming from other departments and so on. There's also the business data column, or the external data column as it's sometimes known, and this is a column type that you can add to any SharePoint list or library. We'll be exploring that, and it provides you with a way of looking up from an external data source. So in the same way that we capture metadata, let's say we're creating a quotation or a proposal for one of our customers, we're storing that document inside a document library. One of the things we might want to do is store the name of the company that the proposal was for. So we could have our salespeople key in the company name, but obviously we're going to get typos, we're going to get abbreviations and things like that, which means that there's no uniformity to that data. So you therefore lose the ability to create effective views and filter or even search that data as well. So you can look up against the external data source using a business data column. and it will give you a list of information, but there are a lot of downsides to that, and that's one of the reasons why we're having a look at the term sync today. You may have come across managed metadata and the term store, and what we'll be looking at a little bit later on is the how the term sync tool allows us to bring that external data actually into the term store, which is even better because there could be subterms and so on that we also want to look up from. There's also Office client integration. So if you're using Word or Excel, Outlook, InfoPath, and so on, you can also integrate with external data using business connectivity services. One of the most powerful things is Outlook. So if we've connected to a table of information such as customers, we can map that customer data through to Outlook, and that information can be then made available as contacts with Outlook. So you can take your customers with you, or all of your suppliers, that kind of information. You can also hook it into Excel, so you can bring the data into Excel if you wanted to analyze it further, and you can also use the document information panel and so on with inside Word, quick parts with inside Word, and things like that, which we'll be touching on very, very shortly. Another very powerful piece is the search capability. So for this use, you need to have the enterprise license of SharePoint, but once you've got that, you can search the external data as well. So not only are we looking for content with inside lists and libraries, but we can also search external content as well. So if you wanted to search for the name of a customer, it might bring back documents that are related to that customer stored in document libraries, but you could also bring back orders for that customer, or purchase orders and that sort of thing from your customer relationship management system, or whatever it might be, as your external data source. And that data, it can be indexed, it can be searched, you can open it up inside SharePoint and see it on a profile page, so you get to see all of the columns and so on. And again, it can be customized as well. So there's some great capabilities there through BCS out of the box. So what we'll be looking at is covering that, and then we're going to move across to BCS Meta Man. And using BCS Meta Man, we'll be creating what's known as the external content type, and that's what makes this data available. It provides the connectivity. It also allows you to generate the methods that are required for business connectivity services to function. Things like the search, will be configuring that, and so on. And rather than trying to do it all within code or building a great big long XML file to define it all, BCS Meta Man is basically a tool that you can connect to about 30 different data sources, point and click your way through it, and the external content type is then generated and deployed to SharePoint. So we'll be doing a live demo on that, as well as some of the out-of-the-box BCS features. And then finally, we'll take a look at Term Sync Store. Term Sync tool, which Jeff will be demonstrating, and we'll be able to bring that data from the connection that I've generated using BCS Meta Man into the Term Store, and you'll be able to see the benefits that brings for users storing uniformed information inside their lists and libraries as metadata. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So business problems resolved using business connectivity services. So hopefully, if you're on this call, you've already made the investment of SharePoint. We're using SharePoint, but look around your organizations and you'll probably have silos of other data stores, whether it's CRM tools, it might be Dynamic CRM, or maybe you're using something like SAP. You might have some Oracle databases for different departments, maybe something like Sage for your accounting. A number of different external data sources you might be using, and they could be in the cloud or they could be on-premise. It doesn't really matter. The key thing is that in order to use that information, we've got to do a lot of cross-training. So users need to be trained on different tools that are used within different departments, whereas what we can do is just make a lot of that data available. Rather than it being stored in silos and not communicating with other data, we can make it available with inside SharePoint, and SharePoint becomes our central hub of that information. So there's one place to go to to search the information, but also look up the metadata for, and also the business data dashboards, and charts and things like that can all be coming from BCS as a connection tool. So how does BCS work? So with inside Business Connectivity Services, we've got basically a number of features that are split between two sets. We've got the SharePoint server-based features, which include the web parts that I've already talked about, the search, the external data column. There's also a couple of bits that I didn't mention, things like the object model and the user profile as well. So even for user profiles, people will quite happily populate their user profiles with inside Facebook and so on, but you ask them to do it in SharePoint, and yeah, that's another thing. So what we can do is just get the information that's already out there. Yeah, having a good, well-populated user profile really helps within SharePoint. It means that audience targeting is improved, as well are people searches. So we're not just searching for a person's name, maybe we're looking for a certain skill within inside our organization and trying to decide whether we're going to recruit or not new staff to have the skill, when in fact we've already got the skills in-house. So the skills that people have are part of their user profiles if they populate them properly within SharePoint. So if we've already gathered that information inside some sort of human resources database, then we can actually use that human resources database to help populate our SharePoint user profiles. So it becomes a secondary user profile store, if you like, via the BCS connectivity. The object model also allows our developers to build custom solutions. So if you, rather than reinvent the wheel, you don't want to get started with writing connection strings and building all of your filtering methods and things like that. It already exists with inside BCS. We can actually get get data coming back in a data grid within about 4 or 5 lines of code using the BCS object model. So if you wanted to build your own custom web parts or your own custom SharePoint add-ins, that object model is there for you to use. Within the Office client, like I say, throughout Microsoft Office, you've got the ability to work with some of this external data. What makes the whole thing available is the piece in the middle there. So we've got the business data connectivity runtime that runs on the server, and there's also a client BDC runtime as well. So if you do have Office installed on client machines, then it has the BDC runtime in order to communicate with the data directly via the Office suite. There's multiple ways of authenticating. So you can authenticate using Windows authentication. You can authenticate using, if you like, mixed mode or sending across a username and password to a store. Or there's also the secure store. So if you were connecting to something like Oracle or something with a completely different authentication suite, then we can use secure store, effectively as single sign-on, in order to pass through our credentials to that external data source. And I've successfully done that for a whole suite of different data sources, including Salesforce.com, Dynamics, Oracle, and so on. So the secure store really works with inside that scenario. It also helps with Windows authentication. One of the downsides to Windows authentication is if you use NTLM and obviously SQL. If SQL is your data store that you want to connect to and it's on another box to SharePoint, then we get what's known as the double hop issue. So one way around that is to configure the secure store as well, so that effectively we're doing 2 single hops via secure store. It's not therefore experiencing the double hop issue. So we'll have a look at some of that when we configure a connection using Meta Man. What we're going to be building using Meta Man is this thing here called the external content type. Now that external content type has the connectivity information and the authentication information, but it also has a number of different methods that describe how we're going to connect and use the external data. So if we just wanted a read-only data scenario, then we would have something called the finder method or the read list. If we wanted to write back to the external data as well via an external list, so allow our users to create, update, and delete data, then we would need to have a creator, updater, and deleter method with inside our external content type. So all of that gets built into this ECT. The metadata store is basically another SQL database, and that stores all of the configuration that we're making. So if we import this data connection as an external content type, it comes in as an XML file and effectively gets written to the managed meta. Oh, sorry, the metadata store, storing that configuration for us. Now, there's a number of different connectors. We have the ability to connect via OData. That was new to 2013. Also available for Office 365 as well. So that allows us to connect to data that might be on-premise, and we want to make it available to the cloud. So maybe we want to use that data inside Office 365. So we can expose the data from our on-premise environment as OData and still consume that connection in Office 365, or vice versa. If the data is in the cloud, we want to be able to get that onto our SharePoint servers, we could still connect to it via OData as well. There's a SQL connector, we have WCF, and also the ability to write your own code, generate your own DLL as a .NET assembly, and build all the logic into that. So you can also create custom connectors, and that's what makes other things available like Salesforce.com and so on that we can also connect to. So so out the box is it's limited, but you can create a lot more. Okay, so who's involved in basically making business connectivity services available? Well, first of all, you kind of need the help of a few people. One is the SharePoint administrators. They've probably got the first job to do. So one of the things you'd need to do is start the business connectivity service application. Once you've got that running, it needs a little bit of configuring. Yeah, they'll be responsible for building that application and the proxy. They would also configure the security. So so they would obviously know about the SharePoint authentication model that it's using, and they might also be responsible for building the secure store layer. And there's also configuring the search, which is all done inside SharePoint Central Administration as well. Database administrators, hey, I've been there. We can't do anything without their help. So if they've got the database, we know what these database administrators are sometimes like. They're hogging this data store, and they don't want to give us permission to access it, or they want to do that in a controlled way. So they're the guys that have to give us permission to connect to that external data source. Once we've got that, we can start working with that data. It can't just be read-only if we expect to be able to create, update, and delete records as well with the database. So therefore, they might be creating some stored procedures, some views for us to use, and that sort of thing as well. Developers. So I say developers kind of loosely. We don't necessarily have to write any code here. So you could be developing the connection using SharePoint Designer, although you could be writing code in Visual Studio as well to create the external content type, or also using something, a third-party tool like BCS Meta Man that we'll be looking at today. And then finally, we've got the information worker. So back in 2007, the name Business Data Catalog was actually a very good description of this. I kind of prefer it to Business Connectivity Services as a name because what we are creating for our end users is a catalog of external data. So they can pick and choose the data that they want to use inside their SharePoint environments. If they want to expose some customer information or some order information, let's generate these connections for them. We'll set the permissions up so the right people are using it, and we'll make it descriptive so that we're not connecting to dbo.customers or something like that. It's actually described as CRM customer information or something along those lines. So they have this catalog of information that they can add to their SharePoint team sites and share amongst their colleagues. So, so lots of people involved in getting this set up, and yeah, they're different roles. So, like I say, you might wear all of those hats personally. So, what does SharePoint BCS give us? So, I mentioned the external list, and basically, already talked about this. It's like an internal list, but you're displaying external data. Now, what makes this very unique is the fact that that external data is not imported, it is linked to, and that is really powerful. There are tools out there that will import the data into a SharePoint list. We've got to really think about what we're doing there. What happens if we have, 30,000 customers, are we going to import 30,000 customers inside a SharePoint list? Well, straight away, number one, we've just duplicated the storage space that that's requiring, and then we've also got a whole bunch of record locking issues in the way, as well as which is the most up-to-date record for that particular customer, and so on. So we're going to run into all sorts of sync issues there and storage considerations. Whereas when we're linking to the data, if it's updated at the data store, it's immediately updated inside SharePoint. All SharePoint is doing is providing a view of that external data, which is really powerful. It gives you the CRUD functionality, so you can create, read, update, and delete. Just like in any other SharePoint list, you can build views, you can filter the data, you can sort the data, you can customize the forms if you want to. There are no item level permissions, which is something that you need to consider. So it's a little bit like going back to SharePoint 2003 days. The permissions stop at the external list itself. So you can specify who's allowed to see the external list, who's allowed to write to the external list, and so on. But there's no item level permissions within it. So let's just take a quick look at what that looks like. So here we have some lists already created inside a team site. The way that we would generate one of these is very, very straightforward. We would just hit the cog in the top right, click Add an App, and we're looking at this list here, this list type, the external list. And that external list is basically prompting us for just a couple of bits of information. It requires the external content type, so you'll notice here if we hit the external content type picker, I could choose something like customers from the top there and provide this a name. So I'm just going to put my initials in there, followed by the word customers, hit create, and that's it. That's all the end user has to do. So like I said, we've provided the connection for them, we've provided the methods and everything inside the external content type, and now they can simply go through and create themselves a list, and they can begin to work with that data. So here's a list of customers and the data that we made available. If we go to the list ribbon at the top, there's all the things that you'll be familiar with. There's the export to Excel. There's the ability to edit the list properties. You can modify the views. You can create additional views, and so on. There's just a handful of things that you can't do. You can't add any more columns to this. It's all defined within inside the external content type, and there's no quick edit view available either. The quick edit view essentially allows us to modify multiple records at one time, and BCS doesn't cope with that. It's just one record at a time that you'd be modifying. You'll also notice that when we go into these, you can make the different methods available. So if I hit the icon here, this particular external list has just view item. It basically doesn't have a creator, updater, or deleter method. Whereas if we go through and have a look at another one here, we've got employees, and via that external list, we can actually go through and view, edit, and delete items as well. So it's up to you whether you make these methods available when you're building out the external content type. Okay, there's also web parts, as I mentioned, so a suite of web parts, and they're very easy to add from within inside SharePoint. You can go through and modify a SharePoint page. So from the page ribbon, we can basically click onto edit, and when we go to insert a web part, under business data, we'll see the web parts that are available to us. So we have things like the business data list, as well as the business data related list, and so on. So we can add those onto the page, and they give us a read-only view of that data. So simple case of opening up the tool pane, and on the right-hand side here, we can choose again the external content type. So we can go through and grab some products this time. We could choose the view, so you can create multiple finder methods, which will be making multiple views available. There's an XSL editor if you wanted to apply style and so on, but otherwise we can hit apply and get a read-only view of the external data onto a SharePoint page. Okay. So we just wait for that to come through. There we go. So it runs independently of the page, which is great. And there it is. There's the data with an edit view option, so you can go through and hide or show columns and add filter configurations and things like that too. Okay. There's also something called custom actions, and these really make BCS come alive. A custom action is just a simple thing. It's a URL, but that URL can take parameters, and those parameters are columns. So one example might be that you've got a list of customers and your users tend to Google those customers. So rather than having them copy and paste the company name or something like that into the Google search box, we could simply just create a custom action, google.com, and then we can have the question mark ID equals and then specify the column name that we're going to send through. So when the user clicks onto the Google custom action, it's already going to pass through the company name column or the contact name column through to Google. And that can literally be any URL type. So if you wanted to email the customer using one click, search them, or even work with a different type of system. One example is I created a solution for Documentum and SharePoint once. So we're using BCS to obtain the metadata from Documentum out of the SQL database. But in order to open up the document, we basically pass through the document ID using a URL in the custom action, and that provided us the solution we were after. The external data column, very easy to use. So just go into any SharePoint list or library, click Create Column, choose the external data option, and from that, again, it's going to prompt you for the external content type and then which column you want to display. So you could take the company name column, the contact name column, something along those lines, and make that column available. So when users are uploading a document, saving a document, creating a list item, whatever it might be, they can look up that information from the external data source as well. Okay, and I think sorry, a couple of slides. Jeff wants to talk to you a little bit more about that as well. There's also some Office client integration that we talked about. So being able to take that external list into Excel is really powerful. There's also things like the Word quick parts as well. So this is a snippet of a Word document on the right hand side. These columns are basically columns that live inside the library, and from the Word ribbon you can go through and add a quick part. So that quick part can be any one of those BCS columns. So from within inside the document itself, we could choose a customer name and it would automatically fill out the customer address details for that customer and write it all back as metadata to the document library. Okay, and like I said, there's also the search side of things as well. So all we do there, make an ID enumerator available inside the external content type, and then configuring the indexing of that data, and then we'll be able to search the external data source. Okay, so at that point, let's talk about the creation of the external content type. I'm going to jump into BCS Meta Man in just a moment, show you how we can build the external content type, and then it'll be over to Jeff to show you the term sync tool and how that will work. So you can use SharePoint Designer, as I mentioned. Visual Studio, you can also build an external content type there. If you use Office 365, you can build an external content type using Visual Studio without code. Basically, you can point it to a table of some sort, and it will build an external list as an app. But it is just an external list. It doesn't give you all of the other things that we talked about. So really, SharePoint Designer, you can use that if you wanted to create a external content type for SQL or for a web service. You can use Visual Studio to create a connection to anything, but you're writing the code, or there's third-party tools available, and that's what we're going to take a look at just here. So the tool that we're going to be using is BCS Meta Man. So this is the tool here, and as you'll notice on the left-hand side here under data source, we've got some of the different data sources that you can connect to. And if we wanted to create a connection to some OData, then we just provided the OData source URL. If we want to connect to Microsoft Dynamics CRM, Then we can provide the URL, username, and password, and secure store. We've got the ability to connect to Oracle just by, again, providing server name, username, and password. And then we've also got some data sources that use ODBC. So this can literally be unlimited. We've got things like DBase, DB2, MySQL, Microsoft Access, and so on. So basically choose any of those and it will generate the connection string for us for that external data source. What I'm going to demonstrate here is connecting to SQL Server. So we've got the server name. I'm just using the local SQL Server name. We've got the authentication mode. Now this top bit here is basically how I'm going to authenticate as the person configuring BCS Meta Man. So I'm happy to just use Windows authentication. That's going to use my credentials that I'm logged into to get at the database to build the external content type. However, once we're connected and this is deployed to SharePoint, we want other users to also be authenticated. So with that in mind, we've configured the secure store. So you can configure the secure store and basically map SharePoint user accounts to maybe SQL login accounts or Salesforce accounts, whatever it might be that you're connecting to. So once we've specified what it is we're going to connect to, we can hit this button on the right hand side here, and that will load all of the databases that are available on that server. So I've got the AdventureWorks database selected. We're using SQL Server credentials rather than Windows credentials inside the Secure Store, and this is the name of my Secure Store ID. So once I hit that arrow to connect, that makes all of the tables, the views, and the stored procedures available for me to use via BCS Meta Man and start to generate my external content type. Okay, so we've got all of those here. Now, if I wanted to build a diagram for my external content type, all I need to do is simply drag and drop the tables that I want to connect to. So what I'm looking for here is under production, we've got the product subcategory, so I can simply drag that and drop it onto the design surface, and it will then prompt me to build some methods. Now these methods directly correlate with the features that will become available using business connectivity services. The first two are required. We've got the finder method and the specific finder method. The finder method is basically going and getting all of the rows and all of the columns from that data source. So if we were to navigate to an external list, let's just click onto products, and right now that finder method is loading and it's loaded all of this data for me. Now each of those, you can create multiple finder methods, and each one could have a filter associated with it that might bring back different sets of data, and that would correlate to different views inside the external list. So I could have, for instance, a list of German customers, a list of United States customers, a list of UK customers, and so on, all as different views within inside that same external list. The specific finder, that fires when we click onto the drop down here and we choose view item is one place where that loads. So when we click view item, it's taking the identifier, we can see that in the URL as well, and it's bringing back that one row. It's also used in the external data column, it's used in search results, and so on, so that's required. The rest are optional. The ID enumerator, this is an optional method that allows the search to work. So when we configure the search indexing, it uses the ID enumerator to build that index. So that would be required if we want to use search, and then the rest speak for themselves. We've got the creator, can you create items? We've got the updater, if you can update the items, and we've got the deleter, if you want to delete the items. And that's it. With BCS Meta Man, we're not writing any code here to build those methods. We're just simply going through and clicking on the methods that we want to have. Okay. I've identified the primary key. It actually selected that by default. So it figured out that that column contained unique information. And we can hit create there, and that will basically drop that product subcategory table onto my design surface. Now we can see what data we're going to get back. If I just hit that icon in the top right hand corner, that will preview the data for me so I can see what it is I'm going to be working with, whether that was the correct data. Obviously something you don't get to do when you're writing code. You need to run it in order to see the data and compile your code and so on. We can also go through and configure some other options. So we've got things like the title column. Which column is it that we want to click onto to open up the item, in other words? We can create the other methods. We can create additional finder methods if we want to have those. We can add filters to those finder methods. So one here we would really need is something called a limit filter. So by default, the external lists can only handle 2,000 rows. That can be that's within any one view, but we can therefore stop an error occurring by setting a limit filter, so it only brings back up to 1,000 at a time. So I can create that. I can also add other methods like comparison filters or wildcard filters to the mix as well, so that allows users to be able to filter the data how they please. And then we've also got the actions that I mentioned as well. So here we can add some predefined actions like the Google search. And how that would work is we would basically take this Google search. We don't really want to search on a subcategory ID, so I can go through and add something that's more relevant like name. So we Google search the name column, and that maps through to this search query inside our URL. So we can build those and basically update our external content type. So that's that one entity defined. I can then go and grab another one. Now we talked about the business data list and related list web parts that can live on the same page. So what I could do is show the category name, click onto a category like pedals, and it would show all of the pedal items from the products table. Or we could show, for instance, customers and see all the orders related to that customer and so on. So again, we basically go through, select the methods that we want to work with, hit create. We can go and define all the other bits and pieces that I talked about, and we build the join, and that join just basically shows which is the one side and which is the many side to that relationship. So once we've done that, we will have something called an association in place, and that association allows the business data list and the related list web parts to work. It also works with the search as well. So if I searched on a subcategory, I clicked onto that search result, it's also going to show me the products on the search result page that are related to that subcategory. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that we can do with Meta Man. Now what I'm going to do is just make this fairly straightforward for Jeff here. So we've got the product entity. Again, we can preview the data, make sure that we're getting the right data back. So this is the data that he will be expecting, and we can also go through, configure the entity. So I want something like a title column configured, and I want a filter method defined as well. So we'll create our limit filter in here, as you just saw, and that goes on the primary key, and we'll hit save. Okay, so that's effectively BCS configured for that one entity, the products table. Okay, at the top here under settings, I can go through and configure things like the name of it. So I'll call this AdventureWorks.products. Okay, we're going to deploy to SharePoint 2013. That has a different model file format to that of 2010. So we need to specify which one we're creating here. And once I'm happy with that, I can just hit deploy. Okay, so yes, we're going to overwrite any that already exist. And that will go through and deploy my external content type. Okay, so that's communicating with SharePoint right now. Deploying the ECT. And just so you're aware, that there'll be about 300 lines of XML just for that one product entity that is basically just been written for us. So so that's deployed, and let's go and use it. So here under View External Content Types, which is in SharePoint Central Admin, we'll just hit refresh, and we should then get another external content type come through. So here it is. We've got product come through here. We can go through and have a look at permissions on that, so we can set permissions as to who's allowed to use this product, or products table. So we can go through and add users and give them different privileges, so who can edit the items, who can execute them, configure them, and set the permissions. So we'll give all of those privileges, and we can also navigate into that external content type if we wanted to view what has been configured. So using that, we'll be able to see all of the columns that are made available in here, whether they're displayed by default, any associations to other external content types, and there's my limit filter and things like that that have been set as well. Okay, so with that created, let's go through and just test it. So we'll add another app. We'll choose the external list. We'll call it BL Products. Select the external content type and choose Create. Okay, I'm not sure if I hit Create or not. There we go. Okay, so we have BL Products now, and fingers crossed, there's all of our data. So that's been available and coming straight through from the SQL database. Okay, so at that point, I'm going to hand over to Jeff, who's going to start talking about the managed metadata service, and we'll also demonstrate the term sync. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks Brett. That was a super tour of the BCS. It amazes me when I see it all put together like that, how feature rich the BCS is, and then how much BCS Meta Man simplifies the process of creating those external content types and the wide array of data types of data sources that you can connect to. So thank you very much for that. That was great. And now let's talk a little bit more and talk about extending the concept of the BCS a little bit further, and how it can also play a role. Your external data can play a role in the managed metadata service. Now, you're probably aware that managed metadata was a large new feature set that was added to SharePoint 2010. So if you happen to be on the call still using SharePoint 2007, you really need to be on 2010 or 2013 or the upcoming release of 2016 to be able to take advantage of managed metadata. And the reason Microsoft added the capability was that there were shortcomings with the existing approaches in SharePoint to creating metadata values. You know, they had given us a number of options, including things as simple as choice fields, lookup type fields or columns on SharePoint lists and document libraries, and even the external data type of field, which or column that Brett just showed us. But the problem with that was that the larger a SharePoint deployment got, the more that would create certain types of silos for metadata values, because those column types even though two of the three, choices and lookups, could be used in content types, and content types could be reused a number of different places on a number of different libraries and lists, those things were scoped to the site collection level. So as soon as you had multiple site collections, or even in organizations that were large and had multiple web applications, the concept of using choice columns and lookup columns and content types with those types of columns in them kind of broke down, because you would have to have the metadata values duplicated across multiple site collections, multiple web applications, and if you had multiple farms, even multiple farms. Well, so Microsoft set out to solve that problem in SharePoint 2010 by introducing a new service application that runs at the farm level, and it's called the Managed Metadata Service Application. And basically, in a nutshell, to really simplify it, it provides a centralized database of managed metadata values that can span site collections, web applications, and even farms. So you can, if you're a very large global organization, you could have a managed metadata service application that is opened up, or you can connect to it from other farms you might have in other locations, and share the metadata values from that one central database. And the database, the Managed Metadata Services database, is referred to as the Term Store, and it's highly scalable. It will support up to thousands of sets and millions of terms per term store. Goodness gracious, if you were to need more than 1 million terms in your term store, you probably have a lot of other problems besides just metadata in SharePoint. Most organizations that I know of would never even come close to pushing the limit on the number of terms in a term store, but you have the option to create multiple managed metadata service applications in your farm, and that would give you, there's a one-to-one relationship between a service application and a term store database. Also, when they built the service managed metadata service application, they really focused on this, that it needed to be completely support multiple language scenarios, and so they've done a really good job with allowing you to create term values in the different languages that you utilize in your SharePoint deployments. And as you can see here, this is the main interface to the Term Store Management tool, and if we were manually maintaining the term values in here, which if you've used, if you're currently using the Managed Metadata Service application, you probably are maintaining some of these values manually in here. You can kind of see, here what the interface looks like. You can also see over on the left, if you kind of look at that tree view in the navigation pane, you can see that another benefit of the Term Store is that it supports hierarchical term sets, so that's a feature that really can make a lot of sense, especially in the example. If you can see there on the screenshot, we've got products, and then within products we've got a category such as bikes, and then within bikes we have a subcategory such as road bikes, and then within that we have individual terms that represent an individual product that we sell. So that is useful in lots of different industries and different scenarios other than this particular business scenario. Lots of industries and businesses have a hierarchical relationship between their business data that's living outside of SharePoint and would like to represent that hierarchically within the Term Store, and it certainly is designed to support that. Nope, advanced one too many. Let me see if I can go back one. So one of the things that if you have the Managed Metadata Service application running, and of course it requires SharePoint Server Standard or SharePoint Server Enterprise. It is not a feature that comes with SharePoint Foundation. But if you have it running, then you have the ability to add a Managed Metadata column type to any list or library and use that as a metadata field for the rows in that list or library. I'll show you a quick demo here in just a second. And the benefit of that is lots of benefits, but it supports the type ahead using an AJAX type of control lookups that we're all familiar with in lots of modern software applications. And you know what that means is if you've got a term set out there, let's say products, the one we've been looking at here in the screenshots, and it has 10,000 different product names in it, the user doesn't have to bring up a picker and scroll through to try to find the appropriate product value. Instead, as you can see in the screenshot there, the one on the back at the top there, there's the type ahead feature, so the user can start typing. The AJAX control immediately queries that term set that's bound to the column and suggests values that match what the user is typing. So it really gives a superior usability experience to the end user, and it makes the task of assigning metadata values to a document when it's added to SharePoint a much more pleasing task. And if you've been around the enterprise content management world for a while, you know that one of the long-standing issues with using content management systems like SharePoint is that we need to get, it's very important for a lot of reasons to have good metadata values assigned to our content that we put in SharePoint. But unless it's a very pleasing and easy experience for the end user, they tend to skip that part of it. Of course, you can make columns required, but there's other ways in SharePoint to get around that by using Explorer View or something to put documents in SharePoint. So you want it to be, it's important for it to be a good user experience, and the Managed Metadata column type really steps up the game when it comes to the ability to enforce good metadata practices in SharePoint. Also, the feature set is very rich, and another example feature that is very popular is the ability to load up synonyms in the term store. So, for instance, in the example here of a certain road bike that AdventureWorks sells, a synonym for that, and we'll look at that in my demo, it would be, we could add a synonym value, it's called an other label, that would allow the user to start typing the product number, because we have that in the external data, but it would suggest as the correct metadata value the actual name of the product. So this is sort of like what I refer to sometimes as herding cats. We can take users who can at times be unpredictable and point them in the right direction so that we get the approved metadata value into our SharePoint content, but allow them to use terms that they are familiar with to start doing the search for the approved metadata value by using this other labels or synonyms feature. And I guess the other big thing about the Managed Metadata column that's not true for the external data column that Brett showed earlier is that it is available in content types. And so if you're familiar with content types, you know that that is a key technology in SharePoint for enabling good content management practices and reuse of, there's just a lot of features related around content types, and the Managed Metadata column type can be used in content types. Now, this all breaks down when it comes to using the term store and as your Managed Metadata strategy, and external data. Out of the box, there's no way to automatically synchronize your term store, a term set in your term store, with an external data source. That doesn't exist. That wasn't something Microsoft added, included in the out-of-the-box experience. So what we've done is created a product called Manage Metadata Term Sync, and its job is to bridge this gap. And so assuming that you have BCS set up and you have appropriate external content types created, like Brett showed you there, the one that he created for products using BCS Meta Man, then you can also add our TermSync product to the mix, and you can easily create a synchronization job that will run on the schedule of your choice that will synchronize the term store with your external data source, leveraging the BCS connection. And so let's just jump in and see how that works with Brett's example there that he created for us. See if I can get flipped over to that. Let's see, Alt-Tab's not going to work for me there, so I will probably just there we go. So let's see how we would do this. Getting a little bit of a lag here. Brett is, as he said, in the UK, and I'm in the United States in lovely Nashville, Tennessee. So we're sharing the same virtual machine via GoToWebinar, so a little bit of a lag. I guess first of all, let's look at why you would want to do this just real quickly. I'm going to go to back to the home page here of the intranet, and we first of all, in our term store, we already have a term set out there called Matters. We used TermSync to create that term set, and you can see as I expand it out here that there's a lot of information in here, and this has actually been created for a legal industry demo, and so you can see this is a hierarchical term set. So let's just use that legal industry example as a quickie here, and let's say that now that I have this term set that has legal matters in it, I'm a law firm, and I've got this library called contracts, and what I'd really like to do is I'd really like to, as I add documents, be able to query against that matters term set and tag those documents with the appropriate matter. So I've already added a column called related matter, and if we go to the library and go to library settings, and we scroll down, and we can see that that related matter column is a managed metadata column. So now let's go ahead and quickly upload an example document, see how what the user experience is. So let's say new document, and I got one that we'll just grab, and so here's a document called iPhone 7 Supplier Master Contract. Click OK. And then the last thing SharePoint's going to do is ask us to fill in the metadata values that we have on that column. So here we have that related matter column that's a manage metadata column, and it's bound to that matters term set. So now it's real easy for me to say, oh, this document's related to the iPhone 7 supplier master contract. I start typing, and as I type IPH, it's using that AJAX capability to query against the term set and suggest the some term values, and I see that, oh yeah, iPhone 7 supplier agreement is the right value that I want to assign to this document. Click Save. Hopefully you can see there, if you haven't used this capability before, how nice and easy of a user experience this is, and is really designed to foster the use of metadata. So I think I hit Save there, but there we go. Screen's refreshing for me, and so now we can see that, you know, my document's been uploaded. Not only that, but I have the correct metadata value that's been assigned out of my term store database. Now, if I want to use that term set in another site collection, in another library, another list, or even potentially another web application, it lives one place in that term store database. So there's one version of the truth in the company. There's one place that the correct metadata value lives, and that's a big benefit. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into TermSync. And TermSync is a solution that's installed into your SharePoint farm, and we get to its main interface by going into Central Administration, General Application Settings, and you can see here that a group is added called Manage Metadata Term Store Synchronization. And it's really it's a pretty simple from a user standpoint. Typically the SharePoint farm administrator is the one that's going to be the primary user of it, because really what it's all about, it's been designed as a simple synchronization tool. You set it up, you do the initial configuration, and then it just, the synchronization runs on whatever schedule you set it to run on as a timer job. So step one to set up a new synchronization is to go to the Term Store Management tool and create a new empty term set. So we're going to do Products, and that's all we need. We're not, of course, we could manually add term values, but you know, we've got, let's say, thousands of products in our company, and how would we maintain that by hand? That's just impractical. But our manufacturing system, or our ERP system, has a master product table in it, and that's maintained by some widely used non-SharePoint application in the enterprise, and there's existing business processes for how product master records get added. So presumably what Brett showed was connecting to that enterprise product master table and exposed to SharePoint via the BCS. So with TermSync now, all we really need is an empty term set, and we can then go back to the term store, or to the TermSync interface, and fire it up. And step two is to create what we refer to as a synchronization point. Really, that is just some configuration setting that says use this business connectivity, use this external content type from the BCS, and map it to this term set in the term store. And here's how the individual columns map between the two. So we can see over on the left in this navigation pane, we're going to see the term sets in our term store, and we're going to select products because that's the one that we want to create a new synchronization point to. And very simple wizard here, we click sync here, and we get our external content type picker. And let's see, this is the one I think that Brett created. So we'll select it, click Next, and then we want to select one of his methods. The method he provided for us to get all the products is the Get All Product method. And give this a name, and so we're just going to keep it simple and call this Products as well, and create a sync point. And what happened there, excuse me, what happened there was that we added a record to a synchronization database the product maintains. It says, okay, this is the master rules for how the synchronization is supposed to be done. And then the last step is probably the most important step, which involves mapping the properties. And so we're able to map from the source data to the term store. We're able to map every type of column that exists in the schema that Microsoft provides for the term store. But at a minimum, we have to map a unique ID field from the source data, for instance, a primary key field, and a name field. That's the minimum, and but there's lots more that we can map if we choose to. So the first group of fields that we will pick from is called the name fields group. And you can see here that on the left is going to be our external content type column, and on the right is going to be the term store column. So this is very simple. We just click Add New. And from the external content type, we pick, first of all, a unique ID field. In this case, we'll pick the product ID column. And since that's the primary key to that data source, and we're going to map that to the ID column in the term store. And then we'll add one more, which will be the name column, and we're going to map that to the name column in the term store. And we can stop there, and if that's all we want, that's going to give us a new term set with all the product names coming in, one term for each product name from our external data source, and then we'll be good to go. There's also some other things that we can map if we have that information available. For instance, we could map, in this particular case, there is, I think, a description field in here. I don't see it right off the top of my head, so I'm going to skip that part of it, but we can map description to description, and it would bring that over. In the label mapper category here, this is the synonyms. So we could map a column such as product number to one of the 99 or the 100 synonym or other label fields that SharePoint provides. We're not going to do that today because one of the requirements for that is that you need a locale ID appended to any of these fields so that you get the right language in there, and I don't think our source data has that set up right now. The custom mapper is similar to the other labels. We have custom properties, up to 100 custom properties that we can add to the term store. We can do that, so let's go ahead, and because it doesn't require locale ID, let's say we want color for some reason to show up as a custom property, and so we'll map that to the custom property, the first bucket of that. So we're going to click Save Mappings and Finish, and so now we have a synchronization point configured in the database, and that's it. That's all you have to do. If we don't do anything else, within an hour, the first synchronization job will run, and it will start pulling over and populating the term set that we set up for products. So we don't want to wait an hour, so let's go ahead and go to Job Definitions and refresh this page. And what's going to happen is there's a timer job named Term Sync Supervisor, and if we run that job, it will look at the configuration database and it'll say, are there any new synchronization points defined? And by default, it's going to run once every hour, but we're going to go ahead and run it now. See if we can catch it running. Usually comes in and out very fast, maybe in a second or two. And once it runs, it's going to create for us it's going to spawn a new timer job just for that synchronization point that we just created. So in this case, for the product synchronization point. So now we can go in, and if we do nothing else, like I said, in an hour, that will run, and our first synchronization will happen. But let's go ahead and run that now. And then if we go to running jobs, we should be able to catch, okay, now it's starting to synchronize. So we should be able to, I think this particular one takes about 3 minutes to completely populate that term set for the first time. And we should be able to come over here and hit refresh and cheat a little bit and start to see some of those terms coming in. Yeah. And so, in this particular case, we did a sort of a flat term set because we didn't really have a parent-child relationship set up in the source data at this point. But you can see that the term values have started to come in, and to the extent that we see that the default label is set to the value of that name column in the source data. And in custom properties, this particular item doesn't have a color. If we get down to a finished good like a bicycle or something, we would eventually see that we could see a color in here. I'm not sure I can get to one very quickly, but that would come over as custom property. So now what's going to happen from here on out is that job's going to run, that timer job's going to run on whatever frequency you set it to run on. It's really kind of a set it and forget it type of thing. Typically, once a customer has this set up and working, they don't touch it, and it just does its job on whatever schedule they set up. And as source data changes in the source system, it'll obviously automatically get replicated over. If a value of a name, term value gets changed, it'll the next time the sync job runs, it'll update the name. So that's and so of course I won't go on and we could go back over to our intranet and pick a library such as marketing collateral library, let's say here, and perhaps in this marketing collateral library we want to add a metadata column and hook it up to that product's term set, and then as we upload marketing collateral we can assign the appropriate product to that. But you've seen that once, so there's no point doing that again. And I think I'm finished with the demo, and probably best to turn it back over to Brett at this point.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jeff. That was excellent. It's great to see the two products working hand in hand, and being able to connect to the external data as well as populate that managed metadata term store as well. So I think the two products work really well together. So I guess to finish off, we'll just have some questions if anybody has any. So we're able to open up for questions during the webinar here. If you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand, which you can do in the GoToMeeting software, and I can unmute you. Or as pointed out, you can tweet Jeff, that's at Jeff Kate, or myself at Brett Lonsdale. We'll be happy to field any questions there as well. And just really as a thank you for attending. If you are interested in going forwards with one of these products, then there is a limited offer which Jeff and I have teamed up together on, and that is that basically BCS Meta Man will be included with any purchase of the PremierPoint Solutions Term Sync tool. So if that is of something of interest to you, and you've got an external data source to connect to, you can basically have the two products, and you get BCS Meta Man included for that. So that's a limited offer, like I say, but there it is. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask. We'll be happy to answer those now. So like I say, just raise your hand in the go-to meeting. We do have one. If I'm pronouncing it correctly, we've got Ramses, which I'm going to unmute you just now. Hello.
Hi, Brett. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Ramses from Holland here.
Okay.
I actually had a question regarding the Term Store Sync tool. I was wondering if we can actually add manual terms to the synced term set.
Yes, thank you, Ramsey, for that question. That's a great question, and the answer is absolutely. So this synchronization is one way. It assumes that your source data is the gold data, the master data, and so it's just going to bring in what it finds in the source data. If to the extent that you want to add manually term values to the term set, you can do that, and Term Sync won't step on those. So, okay. Great question.
All right. Yeah, my next question, but actually you've answered it already. Is it a two-way sync? But no, it isn't, I believe. The answer is.
Yeah, no, because we presume that you're using external data that in whatever the company's approved gold system is for maintaining that data, and you wouldn't want to write back to that.
Yeah, correct.
Of course, if you wanted to write back via an external list, then that would also be possible. So if you wanted to have some sort of, I guess, hidden door to it, then you could have either the same external content type or a separate one that would allow you to write back to that data store as well.
Okay, so basically the column, let's say the products column, you'll edit it in your external list. It will sync back to the database, and then that will sync back to your term store.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yep. Right. You got it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. We have another question as well from John. So I'm just going to unmute you, John. And this is John Coleman. Okay, he's raised his hands. I'm not sure I can unmute you. It might be an issue with the mic there.
Maybe he wants to type his question in.
Yeah.
To the chat.
Yeah, if you want to send it in via the chat or email through as well, it's brett@lightningtools.com would be a great place there. Okay. There's nobody else with their hand raised, so like I say, if you do have any other questions, feel free to email us, brett@lightningtools.com. Jeff, do you want to provide your email address as well?
Yeah, just jeff@PremierPointSolutions.com.
Okay, fantastic. And yeah, John, if you can email your question in, I guess you've got a microphone issue or something like that. We'll be happy to answer it on email. Okay, this has been recorded as well. So if you wanted to watch back the demonstration at a later point, we'll send an email with the link to that recording, so you'll be able to watch it again. But other than that, I think thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I hope you found that very valuable, and yeah, hope to see you again soon on another webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.